EXE Creates have created a lot of retro RPGs over the year, with Kimco publishing all of them on multiple platforms. I've played a lot of them, but one specific series is something that I really like above all the others: the Asdivine games. I originally played Asdivine Hearts on the Vita and loved it there, and loved it even more when it came out on the Switch. And despite being a little bit disappointed by Asdivine Hearts 2, I still really enjoyed it. But those two aren't the only ones in the Asdivine series. While not directly connected to Asdivine Hearts, there are a bunch of other EXE RPGs with the name of Asdivine. One of those games just released on the Switch this week, and I am ready to give you my coverage. Here is my review of Asdivine Dios for the Nintendo Switch. The plot of this game takes place in the world of Asdivine and is around the deity of creation and all of his elemental spirits and sprites that help him govern the world. Each of these beings have spirit trees that connect them to the earth and give them life, but when most of those spirit trees come under attack, the spirits and even the deity himself lose most of their magical ability, so to keep them from dying and the world with them, they venture into the human world to find out what's causing all of these attacks and put a stop to it. First of all, the story of this game isn't really connected to Asdivine Hearts. While it's still a story around deities of the world of Asdivine, all of the characters are different and the story itself is very different from those previous games. That doesn't mean it's not a good story though. The actual plot is pretty interesting, especially when looked at from a religious perspective. It's got a lot of underlying plots that you see not only in games, but actually in religious discussions and debates in the real world. But there are a couple things that bring the story down, the first and biggest of which is the harem syndrome that a lot of EXE Creates games have. Simply put, all of the party members are in love with the protagonist. Now, there's nothing wrong with love stories like this, but their personalities are inserted into serious situations and often completely derail serious situations where you're about to fight a boss into someone randomly just fantasizing about the protagonist for a full minute, completely ignoring the serious situation they're in until someone snaps them out of it and they get really embarrassed and try to run away. It also creates some unbelievable situations where some of the girls freak out over something that they should never freak out about. They'll freak out about something like not being able to breathe underwater, only to be reminded and realize that they're an elemental spirit and they've never had to breathe in the first place, making a lot of scenes extremely confusing and not really believable for the story that's being told. The other part that brings down the story is the script and translation. A lot of dialogue sequences in the game are missing punctuation, missing words, or worded completely wrong. They're pretty minor and you can still figure out what's being said, but there are a lot of them, so it's quite noticeable. When it comes to gameplay, just like its predecessors, Asdivine Dios is a turn-based RPG in a retro style. As you play through the game, the story is going to constantly be pushing you towards new locations, and you're going to be traveling along a world map, through towns and dungeons, and fighting monsters in turn-based combat. Now, when it comes to changes between games, there are quite a few things that are different between Asdivine Hearts and Asdivine Dios. Though I'm specifically referring to Asdivine Hearts 1 because Asdivine Dios actually released between the release dates of Asdivine Hearts and its proper sequel. While it does bring a lot of features back, like the trust and ending feature where you spend time with your characters and can give them items to manipulate what ending you get, the jewel system has been simplified, turning jewels into regular accessories instead of stuff you put on a grid. And they've added some new features that are more common in modern EXE Create games, like a premium currency that you can get from battles and spend on items in a shop to help give you multipliers, get special equipment, or play a little RNG game so you can get super powerful equipment. When we get into combat, not a whole lot is different, but they did add a few features here and there. You've still got two different kinds of skills that you can use, magic that uses up MP and physical attacks that use up BP, but you've also got unison attacks that you can create for your characters once your party is complete. This process takes two characters, a skill from each of them, and combines those skills into a team-up attack. This reminds me of the band attacks from Final Fantasy IV The After Years, just a lot more customizable. Now, all of this coming together does work pretty well, especially in terms of content and length. To be perfectly honest, I was afraid that Dios was going to be a really short game after what happened with Asdivine Hearts 2, but thankfully I was wrong. Across the entire game on normal mode through the normal and one of the true endings, I had spent around 18 to 20 hours on the game. Given that there was still a fair amount of side content I didn't do, you're probably not going to be spending any less than 20 hours on the game, at least if you want to go for the true ending. Now let's get into presentation, which is decent but not great. Asdivine Hearts 1 on the Switch had a huge problem with blurry character models in battle, and Asdivine Dios has a similar problem. Though the blurring isn't nearly as bad as it was in Hearts, Dios does have a lot of blurring on the character models, specifically when you're in combat. Granted, it's not really that bad, but it is going to look pretty jarring, especially if you go through release order of these on console, from Hearts to Hearts 2 to Dios. I don't have any complaints about performance, so let's go right into battery life, which is pretty amazing. Asdivine Dios has a battery range of 6 hours and 30 minutes on high settings, up to 7 hours and 37 minutes on low settings. I think this is the highest battery range that we've gotten out of any of the Kimco RPGs so far. Now, in conclusion, Asdivine Dios is a fun retro RPG in the Asdivine series, even though it doesn't really have any direct ties to the Hearts games. Now, the downside, the visuals are a bit blurry like in Hearts 1, and there are some story and script issues that really hurt the deity focus of the plot. But still, if you're a fan of these RPGs or a fan of the Asdivine series, this is a lot of fun, and you should definitely check it out. Reviews to Go rates Asdivine Dios for the Nintendo Switch a 7.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.